Hello everyone and welcome to today's event. I started at uni, Stories from the Startup Ecosystem. My name's Judy Anderson. I'm the CEO at Startup Victoria and I'm going to be the host for today's event. I would love to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which I'm working from today, which is the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and also extend that respect to wherever this content may be reaching. I would love for you to reflect on the meaning of place and what that means for you as well as you're joining today's event from wherever your feet are planted. I would also like to extend RMIT University's acknowledgement of the people of the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation on whose unceded lands we're conducting business today. Welcome to today's event. As I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about stories from the startup ecosystem. If you are new to the startup community, a little bit about Startup Victoria. We are Australia's largest entrepreneurship group with over 60,000 people in the community. From first-time founders to high-performing pros, we're proud to serve startups here in the state of Victoria by providing world-class founder support services. We're a member-driven organisation and we create opportunities for people to grow both personally and professionally through regular startup events and content. We're a non-government, grassroots, not-for-profit organisation and we're funded by our members, you the community, to remain independent and founder-focused. Today, we're going to be hearing from three exciting founders who started their first company at university. They'll be sharing stories of where their business started, why they actually wanted to start a startup, some of the ups and downs that they experienced along the way, as well as some advice for the next generation of entrepreneurs who might want to pick up the tools and build their own startup for the first time. Our aim is you leave today's event hopefully feeling inspired, and at the very least, you've learnt something new about what it's like to build a startup, especially when you're doing it from university. How today's event is going to work is we're going to invite our panelists to join us in just a moment. We're going to have about half an hour or so of moderated fireside chat content where we'll hear from our panelists, but then you will have the opportunity as an audience member to ask questions to the panelists directly. So how to ask questions today, if you've got a comment or a question for the panel or for one of our speakers specifically, we'd love for you to post that as a comment in the chat, and then our handy RMIT representative, Steph, is going to be letting us know what those questions are. So if you've got a question, post it in the chat, leave it as a comment, and we'll try and answer as many of them as we possibly can in the last 10 minutes of today's event. But feel free to post them as we go so we don't lose them. So without any further ado, I'm really excited to introduce you to each of the three founders. First up, we have Chelsea Ho, who is the co-founder and CEO of Convo. Hey, Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Judy. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited for this.
Me too. A little bit about Chelsea's background. If you haven't discovered Convo before, as I mentioned, she is the CEO and co-founder of that business. Convo is a platform to help hospitality owners run results-driven marketing campaigns in just minutes. Her entrepreneurial journey started at the age of 16, where she ran a small business and a charity organisation supported by the United Nations. This passion for entrepreneurship continued into university, where Chelsea started building Convo while participating in Launch Hub. Convo has also received funding from Skalata Ventures, another popular accelerator program here in Victoria, and is part of their October 2020 cohort. What's it been like participating in Skalata so far, Chelsea?
Really intense. It was a 6-month program, so we wrapped up ours in March. But yeah, it was good, really amazing. Got a lot out of it.
Awesome, love that. That is very true. 2020 was last year. It is now 2021. Time is a vacuum in COVID. That's awesome. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot about your journey there throughout today's event. Thank you so much, Chelsea. Our next founder that I'm keen to introduce you to is Mukul Pendyala, who is the co-founder of Paradigm Australia. Thanks for joining us, Mukul. You're just on mute, which is a classic online event. You're on mute.
Thanks, Judy. Yeah, really excited to be here. Hopefully between the three of us, we can inspire the audience to sort of start their own businesses and give a bit of insight into what it's like as a business owner. So, yeah.
Exactly. I know you've got some harsh but real truths to share about the challenges it takes to build a startup and get it off the ground. For those who haven't discovered Paradigm Australia before, so this is something that Mukul launched in 2019 with his friends and fellow classmates, Sean and Theo. Paradigm Australia began actually as a university project in their final year, and soon after graduation turned it into a shelter-focused social enterprise. And their mission was to provide displaced communities around the world with safe, dignified, and immediate shelter. What was one of your original motivations for building that business?
Yeah, I think when we were doing research, we just noticed a huge discrepancy between the aid relief that was being provided and the aid relief that was being needed, actually. So we were just like, how can we fill that gap, basically? So that's how it basically started as university students.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what you built and how it went and how it was received by industry in a little bit. Thanks, Mukul. All right, our last founder I'm going to introduce you to, their name is Hadden Dixon. He's the founder at Aircart. Thank you so much for being here, Hadden. How are you feeling today?
Hey, Judy. Great to be with you. Shout out to Startup Vic, first of all, for getting this event together in Rmit. It's really exciting to be with you. Really excited to be talking with you guys, and also great to be joined again by Chelsea from Convo, who I've done another previous panel with before. So excited to be with you again, Chelsea, as well.
Nice. Thank you, Haddon. And for those who haven't discovered Aircart yet, it's an innovative on-demand grocery delivery platform that's reinventing how people shop for groceries and how supermarkets fulfill orders in the context of our modern world. It was conceptualized and launched while completing studies at RMIT, as you might suspect, given today's topic panel. But Haddon's got first-hand experience in balancing the demands of building a startup while still being a full-time student. So among other awards and recognitions, Haddon's also been identified as one of the top 50 people in e-commerce for 2021. That must have been a pretty nice accolade to receive. Do you remember where you were when you found that out?
I was probably sitting at my desk working, but it was very surprising. I was very excited and overwhelmed to be recognised with such an award. It was very out of the blue when I received the alert. So yeah.
Nice. Well, congratulations. And I know all three of our founders today have worked incredibly hard to get where they are so far. So we're going to jump straight into our panel. So the first thing I wanted to cover off is just a little bit of context, a little bit more detail. Chelsea, could you just share a little bit more about exactly what the business of Convo is? Like, who are your customers? What problem are you solving? How does the product work? What does it look like? And I know Steph is going to be floating in the background, giving us some visual aids while you're sharing with it. But could you tell everyone what Convo is all about? You're just on mute. Sorry, Chelsea.
Yeah, need to get used to that. Yeah, sure. So Convo is a marketing platform for small business owners. So like Judy mentioned, the goal of Convo is to make marketing easy for anyone at all. So we want to help small business owners create results-driven marketing campaigns in just a few minutes. The reason we built this was because our team's background, we work with a lot of small business owners, especially in the hospitality space. So like restaurant owners, cafe owners, and actually a lot of this work was from the startup before Convo. We actually pivoted into what Convo is today. But throughout that experience, we found that a lot of these business owners, they were really passionate about their business, passionate about their food, but they had no experience at all in digital marketing. So it's like a whole other beast. They have so much to learn, need to invest a lot of time if they want to get it right, like run ads, do SEO. So we ended up building a platform that makes it really easy for anyone to do it at all. And just really quickly, the way the platform works is there's a lot of pre-built marketing templates they can choose from. They pick a template that suits them. The platform tells them exactly how they can run it, so they can set it up in a few minutes. And then once they run it, they can see the results tracked. And like this campaign, it tells them that they got 200 orders just by running it. So that's Convo in a nutshell.
Nice. I know that Australian hospitality businesses, all of our cafes, restaurants, bars, they need all the help and love that we can provide. So I'm really glad that you're building a solution in that space. That's awesome. When did you actually officially start? Like, what was the launch date of Convo as it is today?
It's quite hard to put a date because, as you can imagine, with startups, there's so much like you're constantly iterating. It's hard to be like, this is when Convo was launched. But we pivoted to Convo as a marketing platform probably about like August last year, so close to about a year ago. And then we launched our MVP in January of this year and started getting users onto the platform then.
Awesome. We'll talk a little bit more shortly about the origin story of the idea, because I know it's been through a few passes. Because hopefully now everyone kind of understands what world you're working in, the problem space you're solving for. Mukul, what about you? Could you tell everyone a little bit more about exactly what Paradigm Australia was? And obviously I'm alluding to what happened a little bit with the past tense there, but could you just share a little bit about what the business was, the problem space you're in, and what the actual product was?
Yeah, so I guess just to sort of go back a bit, we were just uni students trying to research the practices of the aid relief industry, and then we noticed a discrepancy and started developing our own shelter with our engineering minds. We're all friends. We just kind of collaborated, and then with the help of RMIT, managed to build an MVP, join Launch Hub the next year, and then through our sort of intensive market research, we kind of realized that the industry was sort of shifting away from this sort of shelter relief for a lot of reasons. I won't go into those details just yet, but in, I guess, April, May, we decided to wrap it up. We just weren't really happy with where we would have to go to with this sort of shelter product. So yeah, Paradigm was just to build a shelter and hopefully we could get these to people who actually really needed it. That was kind of our main motivation.
And such an important problem to solve. Of course, there's lots still to do, but it's really great that we've got great minds like yours and your friends working on it. And what about for you, Haddon? Could you tell us a little bit more about exactly what Aircart is, what you're building, and where it's sort of at today?
Yeah, sure. So Aircart's an on-demand grocery delivery platform. Bring fresh groceries and everyday essentials from local supermarkets in as fast as an hour. So the problems that Aircart was designed to solve was actually two. The first one was about 15 million Australians now view grocery shopping or supermarket shopping as inconvenient, time-consuming, or more recently, a health risk. That's up from about 5 million at the very end of 2019, to put that into context. So a lot of people really view things that way. Then the other problem that we're trying to solve that isn't really widely known is that supermarkets operate highly expensive, quite traditional restricted fulfillment models for fulfilling online orders. And moreover, some supermarkets just don't have any online capacity at all, just because it is so cost prohibitive. So those are the two problems that we're really tackling. So they're quite substantial problems, but we think we've got a really, really fantastic solution that can break these problems wide open. So we're really excited by that.
Yeah. I think it's really clear to anyone who's listening and watching today that you've each found a problem space that you were passionate about, you've found a way to solve it, built a solution, you've got it out there in the market with varying degrees of success and traction to date. But yeah, love that. Now, if we wind it back a little bit, what happened before that? Just super quickly. Haddon, what did you study at RMIT?
Yeah, so I studied business at RMIT, majoring in logistics and supply chain. I also majored in entrepreneurship. So it was all kind of coincidental, you could say, that this is all sort of happening. But how it all came about was while I was studying at university, I came to understand these problems that were existing in society. And I was thinking about the right solution to what the right solution would be to solve these problems. And that's when the idea of Aircart came about. Fast forward, a little bit of time, about a month or so, and I put out an MVP of Aircart, which was literally just a super basic website for people to order their groceries from an unnamed supermarket, we'll say. Strangely enough, people started using it straight away, which was completely bizarre because I hadn't even told anyone that it was really happening. Hadn't told my friends, hadn't told my family. These are just people that were coming across it through Google. Then fast forward 2 weeks, Corona kicked off and it just sort of went crazy. Fast forward to where we are today and we're making significant inroads and getting really great traction with some of the large-scale supermarkets here in Australia.
An exercise in good timing. What about you, Mukul? What were you studying at the time?
Yeah, so me, Sean and Tia, we were all studying civil engineering. So we were friends before that, did our research project together. We actually thought we were going to build a more like transitional shelter, if you will, with like a lot of structural components and things like that because we're all engineers backgrounds, but things changed. We pivoted a little bit and then, yeah, decided to build a more temporary relief shelter.
Nice. And what about for you, Chelsea? What did you study? You're just on mute.
Need to get used to that. Sorry. Yeah, what I studied it's really unrelated to my startup. So I studied economics and philosophy in my undergraduate degree, and then I did a 1-year postgraduate in education, which was in RMIT.
So I know your story is probably the most bouncy in terms of how you actually got to what you're building now with Convo. Could you actually tell us that story, I guess, of like you've gone into university, you're studying something very different to what you're actually building. How did you go from there to what you're working on now?
Yeah, so I think it probably was just like a lot of opportunities, one after the other. It started with a hackathon. So I joined a 3-day hackathon when I was in university. It was a lot of fun. We brainstormed an idea, came up with a whole solution. And that was like the first iteration of Convo back then. It was kind of like a way for you to order to skip the queue, which sounds like, everyone is doing ordering now, but back then it wasn't that common. So after the hackathon, I really enjoyed my time. So when there was like a startup competition run by the university, I jumped at the chance to pitch for that one. And we ended up winning a prize where the university sent us to San Francisco, to Silicon Valley for like a 10-day boot camp. And it was there that I felt like, oh, this is really inspiring. This is actually amazing. I want to build this for real as a business. So that was what I think was the trigger. So when I came back from San Francisco, I actually started to build it for real, looked for co-founders and all that. And then throughout that journey, working with my co-founders, we ended up finding like bigger and bigger problems to solve, which ended up with us pivoting into what Convo is today.
How did you go about finding your co-founders?
Introductions from friends, really. So I have 2 co-founders. One of them is Junmin. He's a tech co-founder, so he's a full stack software developer. And Elena, she is in charge of business development. So they're actually both older than me. We're like totally quite different age groups and social circles. And they both had full-time jobs. I was in university at the time. So I was asking people around, like, do you know anyone who's like super amazing and switched on and all that? Got introduced to both of them. I found them like really smart. They knew what they were talking about. And they, I think they also liked what I was pitching to them. So that's how we ended up working together. This was probably back in 2018, 2019. So we've been working together for like 2-3 years now.
That's great. Did they have any hesitation in joining? Like when you say they loved what you were pitching, do you have any tips or advice for people in the audience who might have a great idea and they're looking for a co-founder? Like what is it that makes someone who maybe hasn't heard your idea yet go on and sign their life away for the next 10 years to help you build a business?
I mean, I think it's the same as pitching to anyone, whether it's like a customer or an investor. At the end of the day, I think if you're passionate about what you're talking about, you also need to like, I guess, kind of know your shit. If you're talking, like, if what you're saying has no substance, no one is gonna buy that at the end of the day. But I think as well, it's not like a one and done deal. Like I didn't just pitch to them and we just signed a co-founder contract on the spot. We actually agreed to try working together for 3 months and make sure that we are, comfortable working together before we ended up, signing an agreement, actually incorporating the company and all that. I think that's really important because finding co-founders is kind of like, like getting married. This is like a really long-term partnership. So you don't want to just like marry the first person you date. You kind of want to make sure that you guys work well together.
That's it. It can work, but it's the exception rather than the rule. I mean, I know, and thank you for sharing that, Chelsea. It's good advice. I mean, Mukul, yours was a bit more organic. Like your co-founders were your friends. Can you share a little bit about how it transitioned from just a project that you were doing as part of your coursework at uni to actually it being a real business? Like, what did that transition look like with you and your friends?
Yeah, I think around July-ish, when we noticed that discrepancy, the 3 of us kind of shared that same passion, and we were all kind of upset that this is what the state of aid relief was. So I think it was then when we realized this is something that all 3 of us want to take forward. I will say, like, I think people always assume that working for your friends is very difficult. And it is. Like, there were very combative conversations that we had, but at the same time, I think it brought us closer together. I think we still want to have businesses together later. So I won't say that it's, while we didn't achieve our overall goals, I think we're still in a very good space. So yeah, like I recommend everyone, if you've got friends, just try. What's the worst? There are bad things, but just try it and see what happens, really.
And lean on the co-founder agreements. There are templates there and best practice for a reason. I mean, Mukul, we've kind of alluded to it a couple of times. Maybe now's the right time. If you could just share with everyone, like, what actually happened with Paradigm Australia?
Yeah, so I guess from 2019 till about 2021 April, we've done about so much extensive research into the market and into the industry. And during 2021, when I was speaking to a lot of CEOs and I was speaking to a lot of high-profile people, I noticed there was a bit of a shift, and a very purposeful shift in how they were going about aid relief. And it wasn't going to be a products-based kind of situation. They were going to provide them with services as opposed to actual shelters. And the reasons behind that were incredibly political, and they would shock you. But we were kind of like, if we were to go down this route, we would be doing a disservice to the people who we initially tried to help. And being a purpose-built organization, we were kind of like, you know what, now's the time to kind of wipe our hands of this. We don't want to be known as that kind of brand that perpetuates this cycle of negative aid relief. We want to be part of the change. So that's kind of where we said, you know what, this isn't something that we want to be part of. Let's look at other ideas of how we can, change people's ideas and change aid relief as a market and industry. So yeah, that's kind of how it went. Don't really want to get into the exact specifics. It can be a bit dicey, but yeah, always know your vision, always know your purpose and what you're ready to compromise on. And if you can't compromise on those things, then look elsewhere.
And so what's happening now with the business? So you and your co-founders still working under that umbrella, or are you still working in the same problem space but looking for a different type of solution? What's on the horizon for you?
Yeah, so at the moment we can't, because we have a very good idea of the industry. We are just looking for solutions that will, fit into our vision. We haven't found something just yet, but we're always workshopping ideas. We're always pitching different ideas, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, going back and researching, asking questions. So we're not done with Paradigm Australia just yet. We're just done with that geo shelter initiative that we previously had. So yeah, that's kind of where we are at the moment.
Nice. Good things take time. That's good. And Hadden, I'm curious with your journey. I mean, you've spoken about it like it almost happened by accident. Was your intention to start your own company, or is this kind of just happened because you kept building something?
I don't think my intention was to actually start a company. I think I got to a point where I was getting towards the end of my studies, about to graduate, and a lot of my friends were getting jobs at, PwC, KPMG, Deloitte, becoming lawyers, all that sort of stuff. And, and I had that as a potential sort of pathway in the back of my mind, but I didn't exactly get great feedback from them. It's not exactly as if they were enjoying their time so much that they recommended it. But I got to a point where I went, all right, well, what am I going to be doing? What do I really want to do? And I figured the best thing I can do is actually create value for people in their lives. And I didn't think that, becoming a consultant was really going to be, I was really going to be able to do that through that pathway. So I thought about it a little while and thought, well, a good idea would probably be to start, some sort of business that would actually create value in people's lives. And that's really when I made the decision that, going into the startup direction was probably the best way to go about it. Creating value in new, innovative ways that no one's really experienced before seems like a pretty good idea to me. So that's what really drew me into the pathway. And then it did snowball from there. But I think it was all about taking that first initial step down that pathway that really got things going.
And it's a motivation that we hear quite a lot at Startup Vic amongst founders. There's this almost this hunger, for change and hunger for something different and hunger for something better. And, there's sort of just opting out of a traditional pathway or a traditional ideology or something that's more dominant or popular to take the path less traveled. And it seems like that's like for you too.
Yeah, it just got to a point, or it can be quite confronting when you do have that point in your life where you do go, oh, I need to take a directional shift here. Which way am I going to be taking? And in most people's lives, that is when they graduate from their university studies. And that's exactly what happened to me.
Was it like that for you, Chelsea? Did you always want to be a startup founder and an entrepreneur, or what was your motivation?
I think like quite similar to what Haddon was saying, I really related to that because while I was in university, I was still like, yeah, I'm actually like, yeah, I'm gonna be a consultant. Yeah, I think it was actually because I joined the hackathon and then, did like the startup competition, got to go to San Francisco, that I was like, this is amazing. I love this. It's really challenging, but in a very fulfilling way. And I felt at that point I had an idea and I had something that was getting like at least decent response. And I felt like it was a really good time to try and build it because I was still in university at that point. And I think like it's, how do I put it? You don't have any burdens at that stage, like you don't have kids to take care of. You don't actually need to have a certain amount of income and that kind of responsibility that comes later on in life. So I just felt like it's a really good time to take a risk. And if everything fails, at the very least, I've learned a lot from it. So I don't feel like I would have lost anything. So I think just like getting started and just joining things and seeing how things pan out was how it went for me.
And then now, oopsie, you've got a real business with real customers and real traction and real growth, and now you're in it.
Yeah, now it's too late to turn back.
That's it. Well, sounds like you've all got some good motivation that's going to stand you through the rest of your business. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face? So just for crystal clear clarity, Chelsea, how long have you been building Convo again?
So I guess all in all, even before the pivot to now, probably like two years plus, or maybe more. Like 2020 felt like it didn't happen, so probably like 2 to 3 years.
What was 2020? What about for you? How long have you been building Aircart?
So the idea of Aircart goes all the way back to the very end of 2018 now, so quite a while ago now. And then I really got started, as I said, and put up an MVP website literally 2 weeks before Corona kicked off here, so crazy timing. But I think probably some of the biggest challenges that I've faced so far, I think in the first 6 months, because I was still studying full-time and still working full-time, and then trying to do services-based on-demand grocery delivery service by myself. That was just like a trifecta. And then you add in there the fact that there was a pandemic, which meant grocery delivery services were just the only thing that could operate. It was just very full on. So for a period of time there, I was, waking up at 6 a.m., going out shopping for groceries and delivering them nonstop all day, skipping breakfast, lunch, and dinner, getting home at 12 a.m. and just doing that for like a couple months. I was doing that. It was pretty full on. And then, you've got your exams coming up and it gets a bit stressful. But there's obviously been like a whole bunch of other things that I've come across throughout the journey that have been huge challenges. One of the ones that I've had to be dealing with is just having ongoing discussions with very large bureaucratic supermarkets and trying to keep those conversations and discussions all aligned and very along the same sort of timeline. It's just been a huge challenge. But that's one of the things that I sort of knew going into this sort of a thing, was that there was going to be challenges. No one's ever done this before in Australia. So it's sort of like you have to expect that there's going to be things that don't exactly line up the way that you want them to. And you just have to deal with that as they come along and be mentally prepared and say to yourself, hey, this isn't going to go all my way all the time.
How did you find approaching some of those large established supermarket organizations as a full-time student who just sort of whipped together an MVP website? How did you navigate that? Did they know the reality of what Aircart was? Hadden in a truck driving around till midnight? How did you navigate that?
Good question. I think it's to a point. Well, I told myself, I knew that this was a thing, that it's a startup. It's likely that it's going to go from a very small sort of thing to a very big thing very quickly. There is that potential for it to happen, especially when you do go from a perspective of trying to make sure it's all the risk involved of a startup is decreased. And a key part of that in the case of Aircart was making sure that there is those retail partnerships in place. So I just told myself that it's part of it, So it was just very much a mentality thing of just going like, all right, let's just go and do it, See what's the worst that can happen. And then on the other side of that, what's the best that can happen, and really trying to aim for that and put everything in your direction to get down that pathway as much as possible. So it's been really fun, really exciting, very uncharted territory. But I think that's what makes doing this sort of a thing so exciting. I mean, yeah, not many people that are 24, 25, 26 years old get to say that they're, in discussions with some of these massive organizations, and they're, looking to Aircart, which, for a period of time was literally just me driving around in my car, delivering groceries by myself from dawn till dusk. It's just cool, I think, a very unique experience that not many people have the advantage to experience. And I'm cognizant of that, so yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that. Mukul, your journey looked a little different. Could you maybe share with everyone, what did you do in the first 6 months? What did it look like trying to actually get Paradigm Australia up and off the ground?
It was difficult. So I was working 4 days a week. Theo and Sean were working full time. So basically I took Wednesdays off, and my Wednesdays were just back to back to back to back meetings, almost like 6 meetings in a day sort of thing. Everything that could be done in the working day, I did on Wednesday. And then I'd just sort of spend the weekends and out of office hours just doing other things, delegating to Sean and Theo and things like that. Basically became CEO by default, essentially. We never had a discussion about it, but that's kind of what happened. But it was really difficult just trying to get our foot in the door, just to chat with someone, say, hey, this is our product. Is there a space for this? It was so difficult. And, we kind of had to start at the very bottom. I was just talking to people who had volunteered at different organizations who I was friends with. And I was like, hey, do you know someone who could help? And they'd be like, yeah, we might know someone. And then things just started to snowball after that. And by the end of it, I was talking to some very high profile people purely just by, exhausting all my resources. I probably got blocked on LinkedIn a few times just by, cold messaging people, because it can be like that as a co-founder. Everything is done by your own initiative. And sometimes your time's exhausted, sometimes you exhaust all your resources. But I think that's just part of building something that you're passionate about. So that was like the first 6 months, just trying to message people, trying to get our foot in the door, trying to promote Paradigm and our vision, basically.
Did anyone try and convince you not to do it?
Yeah, plenty. I think my parents sometimes, my friends were just like, just focus on what you're doing now. Being an engineer, it's already kind of a good income stream. I'm already earning half decent money. They're like, just focus on this. But if you want to make change, it's hard, and it's not going to be an easy thing, and you got to sometimes make sacrifices. So, this is something that we were all passionate about and we put a lot of effort into. So look, I'm not too fussed that I said, I want to focus on this a bit more. So it's the nature of starting. I'm sure Haddon and Chelsea have also had somewhat similar experiences as well.
Yeah, Chelsea, Haddon, anything to add on that? Did you have any sort of detractors around you that you've had to kind of push to the back of your mind as you're building your business? Chelsea, you're just on mute. I can see you talking there.
Oh my gosh, I promise this won't happen again. Actually, I think I'm really lucky because all the people close to me, like my family and my friends, were actually all really supportive from day one. I think for me as well, because it didn't kind of happen overnight, it was like going from university competitions to actually running a business. And we actually were already making some money while I was in university. So at the point where I graduated and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this full time. Everyone was actually honestly really supportive. So I think I'm really lucky on that front.
What about for you, Haddon?
Yeah, I think that it's only natural that people have their doubts about startups because they are just so unusual, especially given the culture towards startups that we've got here in Australia. We don't really have an economy that's very nurturing of startups and that whole sort of ecosystem. But I mean, even people that I'm close with, like family members, were just strange that they would say things like, we have no idea what you're talking about. We don't understand what you're on about. And, even sort of semi-recently, family members have been like, it's crazy what you are doing, in a good way. But they still so yeah, having people have doubts about startups, that's natural, and that's kind of the way it should be. It would be weird if people all thought, oh yeah, that makes complete sense, that should completely work, because if that is what they're thinking, chances are your business has kind of already been done before or proved somewhere else or operating at large scale already. So yeah, doubt's natural. I mean, I won't lie, in the early days I was like, ugh, this sounds so obscure that it shouldn't work. It doesn't make any logical sense for it to work. If it did work, somebody would have already done it. And that's my own doubts. Thankfully, I don't have that as much anymore. It still pops up, honestly, every now and again where you go, oh, that one thing could really knock it completely off track. But there's always pathways around those hurdles when they do pop up.
It's a really healthy way to think about it. They're naturally going to be there. And if it was easy, everyone would have done it already. There's a reason why it's the path less traveled. I mean, Chelsea, I'm curious to hear from you, like having gone through Launch Hub and then Scalata ventures as well. Like, what have been some of the biggest lessons that you've learnt? I guess having that sort of access to experienced mentors and education on what it takes to get to that next level of scale. What have been some of your biggest takeaways participating in those kind of programs?
I think the biggest takeaway for me, actually, from both of the programs, on mentors from both programs, was the need to really focus as a startup. Because I think, like, as founders, we, like, I don't know, like, I think I kind of like by nature, you love like challenges, you love solving things. So we get quite distracted by, you know, a customer might say, oh, I would like this feature. And another customer would say, oh, it'd be great if you had this other feature. And it gets like, you just hear so much noise, and you need to be able to filter out the noise from everyone and be able to really like narrow down what is the biggest problem with the biggest market opportunity that you could focus on right now. Because at the end of the day, as a startup, you have limited resources. You have limited time to prove that your product works. You have limited money, limited labor to make it all come together. And you're also solving a challenge that no one has solved before, which are like two really difficult things to work with. So if you get distracted easily, you don't really focus, it's quite impossible to actually achieve that. So I think going through both those programs, having coaches consistently be like, are you sure? Like, this still sounds like you're trying to do a lot of things at once, was a really good like wake-up call. I think it also prevented us from making mistakes and taking a longer time to find our footing.
How do you find the balance between focus and listening to your customer?
I think that when you talk, I think what makes a startup succeed is when you find a problem, like one problem that is felt deeply enough by a lot of people, right? Because if your problem is not felt by enough people, you don't have a big enough market to, you know, make money from it. So even though your customers might tell you different things, there probably is a pattern in what they're saying to you. And I think like trying to find that pattern amongst what they're saying, because what they're saying is not necessarily like something you should take at face value all the time. It's more important to understand their actual behaviors and what they really need, maybe rather than they themselves don't fully know how to communicate that yet. So it's just going through the process of talking to a lot of them. We actually did like about 70 customer discovery interviews when we pivoted this time around, and just trying to understand the patterns and making a choice, because we actually had to make a choice and say, would we go down path A for the solution or path B? And it's not like there's always a clear right choice in startups. Both ways could have made it work, but you just have to go with the one that makes the most sense at that time.
A solid advice. I hope the aspiring founders in the room are taking note, Chelsea. Thank you so much for sharing that. I've got a question that I would love to actually hear each of your opinions on. If you could jump in a time machine, go back to the very start of your business, what's the one thing you would do differently if you got to take a second pass? Mukul, I'm going to start with you.
I know, like, I guess we didn't get to where we wanted it to be, but I probably wouldn't change anything. I am, you know, like at the moment where we are, I think we're in a very good space. The amount that we learned through that, just the whole process of starting a startup, you know, I was dealing with lawyers. I don't really know anything about legal processes, but now I do. I was dealing with like accountants and things like that. Just that whole process taught us so much. And, you know, it taught us how to present ourselves. It taught us how to pitch. So, yeah, sure, we didn't get our shelter initiative to where we wanted it to be. But without all those sort of setbacks, I don't think I'd be so optimistic as I am now. So like I have, you know, a lot of optimism for my future. I'm very proud of what I did. So I don't think I would have changed anything, even though the results didn't show as we wanted them to. So yeah.
The eternal optimist. I love it, Mukul. What about for you, Haddon? Would you do anything different?
I think if I could go back and tell myself something on day one, it would probably be something along the lines of being more concrete or sort of forceful in my perspective to people, and really explaining things and saying to them, no, this is how it is, this is what's happening, and this is how it's going to work. Not specifically in that sort of a language, but something along those lines. One of the things that I found was that in explaining Aircart to people, they would sort of quite often start going a bit imaginary in their thinking and start taking it down a random sort of path, which would be misaligned with my understanding of, you know, data points and the industry and whatever else. And they would start going, oh yeah, it would be best going down that path, but they wouldn't be basing that on facts or any deep understanding. They would just be sort of doing it based on their intuition, I guess you could say. And that made things a little bit challenging a few times. So yeah, if I could go back, I'd probably just say, hey, be really, you know, when people start going and doing that thing, just remind them, hey, this is how it works. This is why it exists. This is the thing, you know, things are that way for a specific reason. But other than that, I don't think there's too much else that I would really, you know, try and tell myself. Maybe I would say to myself, set firm deadlines for things, but other than that, not too much else, I don't think.
The artificial deadline is the best friend of a solo founder, I've heard. So yeah, I totally hear you there. Chelsea, anything you do differently next time?
I mean, I think it goes back to the focus thing that I was saying. I would have, like with the first version of Convo that we were building, would have done a lot more customer discovery back then. And like really, you know, there's actually like a science, kind of like a bit of an art and science to customer discovery, understanding how to talk to customers to really get to the root of the problem, rather than having them dictate what the solution should look like, because they actually don't know. So at the beginning, we were kind of building like features based on people's requests, and we ended up with this like Frankenstein floated product that wasn't easy to sell because it was so customized based on like, you know, 5 different people's requests at that point. So if I were to go back in time, I think it's pretty standard startup advice. I think it's actually quite hard to follow, but it's just to like constantly talk to customers, really understand the problem, and tailor the solution around the problem, rather than the other way around, which is have a solution and then try and find the problem in the customers to solve that too.
I will say as well, just to sort of agree with Chelsea, committing to decisions and being focused on what you're committing to is really important. Startup founders, as Chelsea also said, we like to sort of look at what the next flashy thing is and sort of pursue that. But yeah, just make decisions, commit to them, and try your best to hit them. Because otherwise, indecision is probably worse than, I reckon, wrong decisions sometimes. So yeah. That's a good point you make, Chelsea.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to switch gears a little bit now. We've got about 10 minutes for audience questions. So if you've been listening in to the insights shared from Chelsea, Mukul and Haddon's stories of building their startup from uni, and you've got a question or you want to get their advice on something, just post your question as a comment, and then Steph from the RMIT team is going to send them our way. So we'll answer as many as we possibly can. So we've got a question coming in, which is, what have been the most effective ways for each of you to get to know your customers better? Haddon, we'll start with you.
Yeah, this is a really good question, because Aircart's actually solving 2 problems for 2 completely different customers. So we've got the consumers who obviously want really reasonably quick grocery delivery. Then we've got the supermarkets who are looking for ways to make grocery delivery efficient and you know, scalable and whatever else. So with the consumer side of things, it's actually been quite simple for us at Aircart. I mean, especially in the early days, you know, as I mentioned earlier, I've been out there shopping for orders and delivering them to customers directly. Little did they know, you know, I was the founder. They didn't know that in the early stages. So it was a good opportunity to actually have really casual conversations with them and get to actually know them really personally. And there would be instances where we wouldn't be specifically talking about the business or the problem or anything like that, but just their general life and how everything's going with, you know, their family life, how their kids are going, just all that sort of stuff. And you really do build a really great picture or painting of who that kind of a customer is and why they start to use the service and all those extra little nitty-gritty details that you might not otherwise have had the advantage of learning about if it had been a really disengaging experience. So that's been really, really helpful in the case of Aircart, being actually able to face-to-face with your customer without them really knowing it. A bit sneaky, but a good tactic if you can get away with it. Then on the other side of that, the problem that we're solving is one for the supermarkets. That's actually been a lot more challenging because these are really big, really bureaucratic organizations, and it can be really challenging to get time to even talk about this sort of stuff with them. And even then it becomes a question of, all right, who do you actually speak to in some of these organizations? Some of the time they've got dedicated people that are specializing in this area and dealing with third parties for delivery services and all that sort of stuff. Other times they don't. So with those organizations that do have specific people that you can speak to, that's beneficial, but you only get one chance to speak to them every quarter, and then that's it, because they're just so busy, especially because of Corona at the moment. So that's made things really challenging. But those conversations, when they do arise, they are a good opportunity to be, you know, really straightforward and really quick in your approach with how you talk with them, and it can really be beneficial when you do that as well. And that briefly touches on what I was just saying earlier about being more quick and straight to the point with some of the perspectives that I've had in the past. So yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have a limited window with a lot of the partner leads and sales leads at larger organizations. So I totally hear you there with like clear, concise briefs. Mukul, I'm curious for you, like what did customer discovery look like for you? How did you get to know what the needs of your customers were?
Yeah, I don't particularly like calling them customers, considering that was displaced communities essentially. So try and be a bit sort of correct in my terminology. So it's not a shot at you, sorry, Judy. But yeah, like, so if you are, I guess, in a similar situation, so Haddon sort of explained that he was dealing with businesses and kind of consumers as well. Speaking to consumers is always much easier. It's easier just to get more data and more information about what they want. Speaking with businesses is, again, I guess, a bit more difficult. But when I was having conversations, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm an engineer and I like maths and things, I started graphing what everyone was saying. And I kind of sort of turning this qualitative data into quantitative data. And I was like, all right, this is the most important thing that a displaced person wants. This is the most important thing that an NGO who's distributing shelter wants. How can we sort of hit these two targets with our shelter? And then so we'd feed that back into the design. And then when we'd pitch again, we'd be like, all right, this is what's important. This is what our data has seen. This is why we did it. So that was kind of how we went about sort of dealing with our client engagement sort of stuff and like customer engagement with the NGOs. And yeah, just like having that sort of points of data was probably the most effective way that we went about it. I don't know. I'm sure there's better ways, but that was just what worked for us, just graphing things. Yeah, we just like numbers, I guess.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. We're going to move on to another question. This is coming in from Kenny. They'd like to know, how can others, for example, the broader community, help or support you better as a founder? Chelsea, what would you like to see from other people?
I actually feel like my startup journey was really supported, like from, you know, like having quite a lot of opportunities to try doing university days to, once I graduated, having accelerator programs in Victoria that I was able to apply to and get. I didn't get all of those, you know, like immediately or upfront. Like for example, with Scalata, actually with both RMIT Activators Launch Hub and Scalata, we didn't get in the first time we applied. We only got in the second time for both of the programs. So I think if there's one thing to make it more supported, it's probably a bit harder for really early stage companies. I think there's maybe not a lot of programs for super early stage pre-seed where you're still doing customer discovery and probably where you're most likely to make a lot of mistakes and make some really big decisions. So yeah, it would be great to see more like support and more programs around that, I think.
Nice. Mukul, Hadden, anything to add? What you'd like to see from the community?
Maybe a bit more support around, I guess, developing products. I think when we think of startups, we think of like tech and apps and things like that, but no one really sort of walked us through the difficulties of developing genuine products and manufacturing and shipping from overseas channels and things like that. That was a really big sort of learning curve for us, because I guess building anything in Australia is really expensive. So more about that. I think more product-based startups and more help to support product-based startups is something that I'd like to see a bit more of. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have any gripes around the support that I've received or that Aircart's received so far. I think that everyone has been, generally speaking, really supportive of what we're doing and how we're doing it and all that sort of stuff. One thing I think that's worth mentioning is that we looked into some grants through government and whatnot, but they were very, very challenging to meet the requirements of. And I'm sure there's a million other startups that have done the same sort of thing, looked into them, applied for them and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, whoever's administering the grants said, no, sorry, you don't meet the requirements and all that sort of stuff. But it just felt very challenging from our perspective, meeting some of the criteria. And just a lot of them they were very niche in who they were, all the organisations that were targeted to. And it felt a little bit like getting excluded from some of them for whatever reason. So that's probably something that, it's not a huge issue, but it's just something that would have been nicer if it was available, if you know what I mean. So, but other than that, everything's been pretty good so far. There's great groups out there. There's, you know, Startup Vic, obviously supporting the community itself, other startups, organisations like RMIT Activator, fantastic. So you just have to scratch below the surface in terms of finding the right groups in the community that can support your vision and help you wherever they might be able to help you.
I'm curious to hear what each of you are going to be focusing on for the next chapter. Haddon, like, what's on the horizon for you in Aircart? What's the next milestone you want to achieve?
The next milestone for us to achieve, probably two things. Signing our very first retailer, which should be hopefully very soon. All fingers crossed. And then subsequent to that would be going ahead and doing a first proper sort of fundraising round. So those are the two things that sort of are closely aligned to each other, but very exciting times nonetheless. And hopefully they all happen relatively soon, because it's been a long journey so far today.
Yeah, totally. What about you, Mukul? What's next on the horizon?
Not entirely sure at the moment, but basically all our ideas are about making communities a bit more resilient in the face of natural disasters. So whatever we can do to provide that, so they're not so kind of over-reliant on aid relief. So if that means some sort of banking system that allows them to kind of transact with a funded credit card or something like that, that's sort of what we're looking at the moment, as opposed to the more product-based type of aid relief we were looking at before. So yeah, just anything that allows people to have sort of empower them to sort of build their lives back. That's kind of where we're heading. Yeah.
Love that. Maybe we'll see you on the pitch stage at Startup Vic's Impact Pitch Night later this year.
Hopefully, yeah.
Nice. Chelsea, what is it for you?
So I think for us, we've kind of got to the point, we've got about like 100 users signed up onto the platform, but a lot of them were through, you know, basically like slogging and like selling face to face. So now we're really trying to focus on growth. So being able to grow in your typical startup, scalable, exponential way. So right now we're focusing on our conversion rates, like the website sign-up conversion rate, and then the conversion rate from trial user to paying customer, and trying to run lots of experiments to keep increasing and improving that conversion rate until it's at a healthy level.
Nice. You've clearly been getting some great coaching, or maybe it's natural and focus on the right metrics of the business, but that's great. Nice.
Thanks.
All right, we've got time for one last question. Just very quickly, your final piece of advice. Like, if there's someone in the audience today who's heard your story and has got that idea in the back of their head, or maybe they don't yet have the idea, but they know that there's a problem they're really passionate about and they want to go about solving it. What is your advice for how to build a startup? Where would you start? Chelsea, we'll start with you. What's your advice for our next generation?
I think just like to literally just to start whatever it is, so like if you don't have an idea, go work for a startup you really like, that you really believe in and that you use every day. Or if you have an idea, then start talking to customers, or you can, definitely talk to customers and then try to build something after that. But you can, whether you're a developer or not, there's so many things out there for you to build now. I think even when we were just starting out, we built our product on Google Sheets, even though my co-founder is a developer. I think Steph has a picture somewhere. I don't know if she can get it up, but we actually like, you can literally build a lot of things now online. There's so many no-code tools, even Google Sheets, you could like make something work from it. So yeah, I think like don't worry about being like getting things right the first time around, or it's really not like a very clear and smooth journey. Even if you just have like an idea of what you're going to be doing next week, you should try. You don't need to have the next 5 years planned out. You don't need to know exactly what you're doing and have everything perfect before you even get started.
Love that advice. Haddon, what is it for you?
Yeah, I think Chelsea just mentioned it there. Getting started is always the best thing to do. You will inevitably find that things do snowball from there. And there's a whole lot of pathways for you to go down. You inevitably are confronted with situations of questions of like, do we go left? Do we go right? Which pathway do we take? But you'll naturally find the right pathway to take. You just have to actually get started and get the snowball going. I'm a pretty firm believer that everyone should, at least once in their lifetime, start a business of their own. It doesn't have to be some, super high tech, high growth type startup business that's all the bells and whistles. It doesn't have to be something like that. It could be something super simple, like selling lemonade out of a lemonade stand. It can be something as trivial as that. But I think what's important is the actual life experience of actually doing it, because you can't really pay money for that experience. And then you're inevitably going to get to an age where you're 80, 90 years old, and you might very well be thinking, oh, I should have, tried something a bit out of the box, something a bit unusual. And most of the time having a startup is that missing piece that people might very well be missing.
Yeah, it is one of the greatest endeavors you can undertake in your life. I agree with you. Mukul, sage words of wisdom for our audience?
I think the other two said it as well as I'm going to say, but yeah, just start. Even if, you don't achieve the goals that you want to, the sort of self-involvement that you'll go through and this kind of self-discovery, you'll realize the person that you kind of want to be, you realize what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, and then you can grow from there. So I think like just taking those first few steps, just try and accept that it's going to be a bit of a challenge for the first few months or so. But if you've got the passion, if you've got the drive, you'll get through it. So just try. That's all I can really say.
And go ahead, Chelsea.
I was actually just going to add on to what both Haddon and Mukul said, but I guess part of what I was thinking when I decided to go down this path in uni was, even if it did fail, I feel like employers would then find me very employable, because I had, challenged myself and took the initiative to build and learn so many things from it. So I was kind of like, if this fails, I'll just go and apply and be a consultant. And I feel like they would be really interested in what I have to say. Now I would not go back to wanting to be a consultant, but I feel like it actually makes you more employable. It doesn't strip you away still from that traditional career pathway opportunity.
And even then, there are so many opportunities. If you feel like building the business isn't quite right for you, there are amazing jobs to go and join an early stage startup and learn those skills. So the world is going to be moving forward, as we all know. The whole theme for what's next has been that the digital world is coming, and we're not going to leave anyone behind. There's so many ways to get involved, either starting your own business, working at a startup, or at the very least, like just learning a new skill that's going to be something valuable for those companies in the future. So thank you so much for building what you're building and sharing your insights. Please join me in giving a virtual round of applause in the audience to Haddon, Chelsea, and Mukul. To each of you, thank you so much for sharing your stories. I just wanted to call out a couple of the pieces of advice before we wrap up that you shared, which I just think are worthwhile just saying again. The getting out of the building, going to hackathons, exposing yourself to startup events and the community just to meet potential co-founders, figure out what you're passionate about working on, and learn new skills and build your entrepreneurial network. I think that's great advice. Your co-founders can be friends. They can be professional contacts. There's no sort of right or wrong there. But doing the due diligence of trialing everything out before you sort of jump in with 2 feet, I think was solid advice. You each spoke about how much you loved the problem over the solution, and that obsession with the problem, whether it was in your customer discovery, your motivation for starting your startup. It actually really wasn't about the bells and whistles and the app and the features, and it was really about like, what impact are you creating by building this business, and are you actually going to move the needle on solving that problem? And I think that's a really great anchor for anyone working in a startup. Your self-belief, just remaining anchored in your own motivation, your own passion, and trying not to get too distracted by what the rest of the world believes you should be doing. It's going to be really critical. And yeah, there's lots of other things, but they were some fantastic insights that you've each shared. A couple of sign-offs from me. Thank you so much to RMIT University. They're a well-valued industry partner of Startup Victoria. And thank you so much for organising the What's Possible Entrepreneurship Festival and today's event. I started at uni, stories from across the ecosystem. If you do want to learn more about the RMIT Activator, there's lots of ways to get involved. Head to their website. I think Steph might be posting a link to that in the comments. So do check that out. There's lots of community events. There's an accelerator, a pre-accelerator. There's investment available, some funding grants you can apply for. So do check that out. And of course, Startup Victoria as well. You're welcome to sign up as a free member in the community, or if you do have an actual idea that you're working on, you're welcome to sign up as a member and get access to mentorship, members-only events, discount codes, and advisors who have done it all before. That community is there for you to access as well. And I do encourage you to reach out to Paz Pizarski, who's our community manager on LinkedIn. She'll be able to help you find your way. But again, thank you so much, Chelsea, Mukul, Haddon. Good luck to everyone out there who's building your first startup. We're really excited to see what you do. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you around the community soon. Thanks, everyone.